is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're talking about Sophie, who is a venture capital investor and ecosystem builder focused on creating stronger, more connected networks for women in venture capital. Before founding Unlock VC, she spent several years at Anthemus working with early stage companies, especially in fintech. Unlock VC was founded in 2022 by Sophie, Winwood, and Ruth Fox Blader to address the underrepresentation of women in the venture capital industry. What started as a community has grown into a global platform with more than 1,000 members, including GPs, LPs, VC investors, and angel investors. Sophie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited for the chat.
Great. So can you give us the founding story behind Unlock VC and the problem you were trying to solve with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a venture capital investor for the last 7 years now. And at my previous firm, Anthemus, I was very fortunate to work with a female partner. You've mentioned her already, Ruth Fox Blader. And we have always been just really upset with the state of diversity in venture capital and the corresponding funding to female founders. I'm sure you and your listeners know the stats we all love to hate about the amount of venture capital funding that goes to all female teams. You know, it's not changed since I started investing. It kind of sits around the 1.52% mark. But we were really coming at it from a place of, well, we were two empowered female investors. We invested in a lot of female founders, and those female founders ended up being the best performing assets in our portfolio. And as you can hear from my accent, I am British. I am in the UK, and Ruth is actually from the US, from New York, and we saw that there were a lot of initiatives in America supporting women in venture capital and nothing really in Europe, which seemed like a weird gap in the market. I know Europe is always a little bit behind the US in terms of venture trends, but we thought we'd jump on this one and kind of start a platform and a big event to support women in venture capital.
Well, tell us your experience about building a global community for women working in venture capital. What was that like?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I went out with this idea of building a global community and it was all planned but actually it ended up being relatively organic and what happened was the original idea was just an event. So we did a 350 person event in Paris back in 2021, which was a real success. You know, we had really amazing speakers and partners. And we were using WhatsApp to communicate to our attendees because we were just starting out. We couldn't afford an event app. But afterwards, that community just kept, kind of WhatsApp group just kept being really active and people starting other WhatsApp groups, you know, kind of calling it Unlock Climate and Unlock FinTech. And it was about the same time that WhatsApp released their WhatsApp community functions. So we brought all of these groups under our own umbrella and we just kept seeing it grow. So it went from, 350 women attendees to the 1.2 thousand women that it is today. And I think the great thing about venture is, venture is global. And while we are focused on European women in VC, we found that US investors were just finding us out of nowhere. We weren't doing any marketing really in the US. And kind of what we realized is, all US investors are, or not all, but a lot of US investors are interested in Europe at the moment, slightly cheaper deals, slightly less competitive, a little bit of a hole in terms of growth investing. But a lot of European investors want to know US investors because they want their portfolio companies to scale over to the US. And so it ended up being this quite natural connection that we could make. But yeah, it definitely wasn't super planned, but shows that there is a need and kind of we keep finding people that wanting to get involved in our organization.
So what do you see as the major trend shaping the venture capital industry over the next 5 years? How is it changing?
I guess there's venture as the industry, and then there's diversity in venture capital. And I think, I imagine some of the trends that you've been speaking out quite a lot is the lack of exits that there have been over the last couple of years, leading to this dry up of liquidity, leading to LPs, being a little bit more hesitant in this asset class. And so just venture capital funds having more trouble raising. And that is leading to a concentration on venture capital funds that can actually deliver returns. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a bell curve or a barbell in terms of the funds that are working. There's the kind of big, massive, global platform VCs that have everything from pre-seed to growth pre-IPO. And then you're seeing these smaller, more nimble, focused on a specific geography, a specific vertical, and a specific stage. And then I think everything in the middle is really struggling to differentiate. And I think we'll continue to see that play out, especially with everything that's happened in AI. It's never been easier to start a company, but actually no one's quite figured out what it means to be a good AI company yet. And that's why you're seeing a lot of flight to big, the Anthropic secondaries or rounds, and everyone's trying to get into them, because actually playing around in the early stage is very, very difficult. And then on the diversity point of view, I think it's been a really, I think since Trump sort of decided D&I was not important anymore, we've seen a real retraction from the importance of diversity within venture capital. And where we were seeing LPs kind of pushing this mandate, we're now seeing that it's not the priority anymore, and everyone really just wants to focus on automating internal processes and getting in front of the best AI companies. But I think that's a real risk, because as venture capitalists, we should know that diversification is key. That's like our whole business model. And so we can't be diversified investors without investing in a diversified group of people. And so I think there's a real opportunity for funds who do get the opportunity to focus on this. It's harder work, right? These diverse founders are not in the networks that you can easily access. They're, a little bit harder, but you just need to look that little bit, do a little bit more work, and you can find amazing companies that aren't as competitive as the rest of the market. So I think there is a real opportunity there.
So, how do you see the diversity of perspectives improving investment decision making? Where does that come about?
So it's been backed by data for a very, very long time. We know that diverse teams outperformed non-diverse teams within organizations. And we also know that diverse investors produce better returns for their LPs. There's quite a lot of studies that have been done on that. But that doesn't seem to be moving the needle. That data has been around for a very long time. And I think, it's the problem is it's entrenched networks, and people wanting to, there's like unconscious and conscious bias of, if you think about the majority of kind of decision makers within funds tends to be one type of investor, and that would be a white man. And they end up recruiting people that look like them, they end up investing people that look like them from their networks. And so that our mission is, you need to change what's happening in venture and the decision making roles to enable funds to flow down to a more diverse investor base. You can't just kind of expect the current industry to wake up, because if you could, that would have happened over the last 10 years, because everyone knows the data about diverse teams. So everything, we're a capitalist society, everything comes from money. And so what we do really need to see is it coming from the top, and that's from the LPs. If we did see LPs stop funding, all white male ICs, if we stopped funding VCs that only invest, had no female founders in their portfolio, then we start to see the change. But I think until that, it just happens on an individual fund by fund basis, and hopefully the returns will prove out at some point.
So, what do you find is the common characteristics of successful emerging venture investors? What do you see out there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and there's been a really interesting trend recently about the emergence of solo GPs, and these are very successful VCs that kind of feel like they're ready to work with it, outside of the restraints of a big organization, be able to move a lot more quickly, make decisions quickly, but come with a real depth and understanding of the venture market and a lot of experience. And so I think who we see, successful GPs, because we see a lot of GPs going out to fundraise, and we see the kind of successful ones, whilst the ones that are struggling, is either that great background in terms of being at a great fund or having years of venture capital experience and a good track record under your belt, or some form of unfair advantage, be that an operating background, be that lots of experience in a specific space. It could be health. AI obviously is the one that comes up a lot. There's when previous years VCs haven't looked at hard tech and physical software, now we're seeing, with the rise of AI, physical AI and hard tech coming back into the venture capital sort of vertical investing landscape. And so kind of managers that have some expertise in that is really interesting. So yeah, and then I think it's like anything, like a founder, they need to be good at fundraising. You need to be good at telling a story, you need to be good at selling your product, and you need to be good at building relationships and getting people to commit to you.
So what's your advice for founders seeking to build relationships with venture funds? What do you tell them to do before they write that email?
I would tell them not to write that email. I think one of the issues with this industry for diversity is we're not very good at cold inbounds. We want things to come from network. We want things to be slightly validated before they come into our laps. And I'm not saying that is the best way, but I'm saying that is the way, and founders need to play the game. So my advice would be, instead of sending an email, figure out who the decision makers are within the fund and find someone that can introduce you warmly to that. It could be another investor, it could be a portfolio company founder. I think one of the, and ideally it would be a couple of people kind of sending an email like, hey, have you seen this company? That really creates the kind of FOMO that investors are looking for. But I think a warm intro is the best. And the other thing would be, get out there, go to events, get your profile, raise your profile. I think there's a lot of ways that you can do that now so that you can get in front of and be seen by the right investors. But there's always a balancing act of, you need to build the company. That's really important. But also your job as a founder and a CEO is hiring, firing, fundraising, and kind of delivering on those promises to your investors. So it's a big part of your job as a founder, and you need to think about it as a job rather than a thing you need to do at some point.
Great. Let's talk about the importance of global networks in modern venture investing. It seems like the world is going global all more and more all the time. What do you see there?
It's a really interesting conundrum I think we as a venture industry are facing, which is talent. I'm stealing this from Laura from the Venture City, but talent has no postcode now. It's because it's so easy to start a company. We're seeing, you'll still have the hubs. You'll still see a lot of innovation coming from San Francisco, from London, from New York, but actually that spread of talent is coming from everywhere now. And so what does that mean for an investor? It means that you can't be reliant on your local networks anymore, and you do need to be kind of everywhere. But is that practical? Absolutely not. I think anyone who's an investor who's tried to do it all knows that it doesn't work. And so I think picking one or two geographies or areas that you just really want to dive down in, I think is really important. So instead of trying to boil the ocean, is pick the things you're interested in, pick the geographies where you want to lean into and you've got good connections. And then I think it's all about, and it's always been about, but even more so, is just building real human relationships that aren't surface level. And that obviously takes time, but if you've spent the time getting to know someone and their local ecosystem, they're much more likely to pick up the phone when they see an interesting startup, when if you've just met them and, very surface level kind of chatted and said, please follow up.
Great. Well, let's talk about AI. It's here, and by some means, it's everywhere. But how do you see it changing sourcing, diligence, and portfolio support in your area?
We did a session with this on our community a couple of weeks ago, and I think everyone, I'm not going to say that I have any answers. It's very much a figuring out time. I think where we'll land is a combination of automation of data within funds and third-party solutions that are really like point solutions for certain things. And what we've seen with our community is started off that a lot of funds went and hired, AI experts to go and automate and build AI products within the fund. And then what they quickly realized is domain expertise kind of trumps technical expertise at this point in time, because one, you can build quite easily with AI, but two, you really need to understand the intricacies of venture capital workflows to be able to automate them and to understand what is worth automating and what is not, and also to put in the kind of criteria and nuances that is what a venture fund is all about. So now I think what's happening is, instead of hiring an external, they are having a dedicated AI person, which might be a portfolio, it might be an investor who's interested in that, whose job is to really figure that out. But then you're seeing, really good point solutions. A lot of the back office, fund solutions are now doing really cool stuff with AI. We work with Embankment, who are doing a lot of automation on the back end, which is great. No one likes back office and fund admin. And then you're seeing products like Harmonic come on that are AI sourcing tools, which is completely automating finding and kind of sourcing across multiple data sources. So I think we'll keep seeing organizations pick off the different parts of it. But at its heart, will an AI ever make an investment decision? Probably not. Will an AI ever win a deal? Probably not. Will an AI sit on a board? So it's still a lot of value in that, our job as investors. It's just hopefully it will free up more time so investors can focus on the things that they want to do, which is go out, build relationships, and support their portfolio companies.
So, what are the challenges and opportunities for first-time fund managers in today's market?
Oh, it's such a really challenging time for first-time fund managers, I have to say. It's never been, I mean, I say this every year, but I don't, it's like one of the most difficult times to be raising a fund, I believe, at the moment, because you have a lack of capital sources, but you still have quite a lot of competition. There are still a lot of people out there raising funds, but the amount of capital available for those funds has drastically decreased. So I think it's the standard things of, do you have enough personal runway to kind of take on this slightly longer fundraising environment? Do you have the mental stamina and the support system around you to continue to do this, to get the no's, to find the right investors? And do you have a product that, a venture product that makes sense in this market? But I think the opportunities are, it's like any massive shift and any upset. When I was a fintech investor, and when we had the big financial crisis, that was when most of the big fintech players were born, because it was a lot of people were let go of their jobs, people found a bit more time, and they were building problems. They wanted to building solutions to solve problems they were experiencing in these big corporates or big financial institutions. And so I think there is a lot of opportunity when landscape shifts and you get big platform shifts, but it's just higher risk. So you have to be aware of the risk. That's our job, understanding risk. And then you just have to be okay with, it's a lot of time and mental energy that you need to put into these processes.
So, what's your vision for the future of Unlock VC and how the venture ecosystem can become more inclusive?
Yeah, I think, there's what we want to do is support a more diverse, get capital into the hands of more diverse investors. And how we think about doing that is, one, kind of highlighting role models. So ensuring that women see, you can't be what you can't see. And so that's what happens at our summits. Women come, they see all these incredible female investors on stage. And, we don't talk about how hard it is being a woman. We just talk about how to be a great venture capital investor. And so kind of inspires that next generation to believe they can do it. The second is obviously this community. And I definitely want to keep growing this community, keep building that US-Europe bridge, because we are basically supercharging the networks that men are innately born into. And we all know how well networks work within venture capital and actually more globally. And then the third is kind of the tools to get there. So, and we think about that both in terms of professional tools, like we run board training for women in VC, kind of all of those building blocks so you can become a great investor. But kind of secondly is actually the technical toolbox, kind of how can we support our investors to be kind of transitioning into this new world of AI-driven investor.
Great. So, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophie Winwood. And also, if you want to find out anything more about Unlock VC or get involved in our community, you can check out our website. It's unlock-vc.com.
Great. We'll include your contact details in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope you have me back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you very much.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.